Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name is Rory Paquette. Yes, I know. I know you know that. I just like to remind myself of how grateful I am to be sitting in this chair. And folks, when we made the move to 7 days, you all showed up so huge. I mean, you just came through for us so much that I spend every day just being grateful for the fact that you're out there doing what you're doing. Gives me a chance to sit here and do what I'm doing. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. As we get rolling here, if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, then you know what time it is. That's right. Time to take a sip of my preferred beverage and get this going. Oh, delicious stuff. Fantastic stuff. We're recording this at 5:30 in the morning, USA time. So I'm loving this right now. Huge. But you know what we're drinking? That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up, check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. They brew a mean cup of Joe. It's a fantastic cup of coffee. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, including supporting veterans, which you all know is incredibly important here at the Power Man Podcast. If you are a veteran, I want to thank you and your family. Well, from the bottom of my heart, we're grateful. Thank you for your service. I don't get to sit here talking about what I'm talking about unless you're out there doing what you're doing. So you've given us the freedom to have this show, and we want to return the favor. We love you, and we're glad you found a home here at the Power Man. So is Freedom Hill Coffee. At Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram, look them up, check them out, and tell them Power of Man sent you. Let me get one more sip of this fine beverage before I, try and keep up with this young buck across the table from me. All right, you guys are going to absolutely love this. I love to bring, new and exciting things to you guys every chance that I get, and I'm already fascinated by this entire topic. So, our guest today is a coach of something called Ikigai. All right, and you're going to learn all about this today, and you're going to learn about what it's not, which is also really cool. He's the founder of the Ikigai Tribe. He has written two books, IKIGAI-KAN, Feel a Life Worth Living, and he's written a book called Rolefulness, which I think is going to be very important also in this discussion. Folks, please welcome to the show, Nick Kemp. Nick, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, Rory. As I said earlier, I think you should be in radio, or you should have been in radio 40 years ago. So it's a joy and honor, and really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. This is already a very interesting topic. You spent a long time in Japan. You've done an awful lot with your life. Just tell everybody a little bit before we get started about who is Nick Kemp, and what kind of got you into all this.
Well, like many of your listeners, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I've lived a good chunk of my life, 10 years in Japan, which actually started with a trip when I was 5 years old in 1977. And my father was a physicist, sharing his research across the globe. We stayed in Japan for about 5 days, and I had this fond memory, or several fond memories of the people, and particularly a babysitter who had to look after me and my brother one evening as my parents had to go out for dinner. And I think she was very playful and probably folded origami and maybe sung some songs or something. And so that might have planted a seed in me, because later in 1995, I returned as a trainee chef and then spent a year in Japan, and that, yeah, changed my life. And since then, I guess I've had this love affair with Japanese culture, and it's led me to many places, amazing relationships in it. I think in Japan, I also found my entrepreneurial spirit. So Japan's, yeah, had a huge impact on my life.
Wow. Wow. Now, the this practice of Ikigai. Um, I I always check everything with my guests when they come on because I've been doing this a long time, and if you can't get it straight from the horse's mouth, then you got an issue. So I always check everything. I went and Googled this stuff, and I came up with what I now know is actually the wrong definition of this. It's sort of a misconception that's out there, and it talked about things like the four key elements, and what you love, and what the world needs, things like this.
Mm.
uh, After talking to you for just a couple minutes, basically, that's not what this really is. This is a misconception that's out there. Can you speak to what is Ikigai, and how can it be defined? What are we really talking about here?
Sure, and it might be helpful actually to touch on that Venn diagram. So if the listeners, some listeners I'm sure might know the Venn diagram, or if you Google Ikigai, inevitably you'll come across this sort of four circle Venn diagram that asks you, are you doing something that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and that you can be paid for? And if you hit all those four questions, you find this sweet spot where, supposedly you find your Ikigai. Now that's inspiring. Originally, that was called the purpose Venn diagram, but it's actually a contradiction of the concept. So Ikigai really asks the question of what makes your life worth living, and all of us would know, well, it's more than one thing. It's subjective, so it's something usually unique. It's personal. It can involve roles, relationships, hobbies, future goals, work, even memories. So it's a spectrum of what makes your life worth living. And it's often found in the daily stuff, in the small joys for Japanese. And actually, Sony has a insurance arm of their business. And this year they did a study of 14,000 Japanese across all age groups. And the number one source of Ikigai, because we have different sources of Ikigai, was food. And then after that, travel. Then after that, hot spring baths. So it's not this ambitious goal to achieve. It's more the small stuff, but can include life affirming or life defining goals.
Interesting. I mean, that is very different than just the straight up Venn diagram, the way the way it's presented. And so I appreciate you, putting out that discernment about what it is and what it's not. Now, this is something that you have researched huge. You are an Ikigai coach. You're the founder of the Ikigai Tribe, and you've written two books. One, IKIGAI-KAN, Feel a Life Worth Living, and then, of course, Rolefulness. Um, I'm not sure which one of these things came first. Um, maybe you can help us with that history.
Sure. So Ikigai-kan came first, and I titled the book Kan because Kan means feeling, perception, awareness. And Ikigai is something you ultimately feel. So it's really what makes your life feel worth living. And I should mention the research pioneer of this concept was a lady called Mieko Kamiya, and she wrote a book in 1966. And a lot of her study and research came from working with Japan's ostracized lepers. And all these lepers from the, I think, 1950s were shipped off to islands. They weren't allowed to procreate, so they didn't grow up with children. They're obviously disfigured, blind, had fairly difficult lives, and most of them struggled to feel that life was worth living, but some did. And she was interested in thinking, probably of all the people in the world, you would assume these people would struggle and lead fairly unfulfilling, meaningless lives, but some could find Ikigai. And then she dived into the research on atomic bomb survivors, people in Singapore on death row reading their letters, people suffering bereavement. And she created this whole theory of Ikigai. And that included this definition of you have Ikigai sources and you have Ikigai-kan. And so your sources make you feel obviously positive emotions, but even existential challenges where you overcome adversity or you take on a challenge worth pursuing can obviously make you feel that life is worth living. So it involves all these ideas, and I really relate it to positive psychology because she spoke on the topics of life satisfaction, change and growth, having a bright future, social affiliation or connection, having a sense of freedom, life satisfaction, I've said life satisfaction, self-actualization, and having a sense of purpose. I was thinking, wow, she predates the positive psychology movement by sort of 35 years, yet
Wow.
no one knows her. And I love to bring attention to her work. And so that's why I titled the book IKIGAI-KAN to say, oh, this is something we feel, but also to pay recognition to her contribution to the concept.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Mm.
So that's what that particular book is about then.
Absolutely, yes.
Got it. Got it. Okay. The other book, Rolefulness. I mean, just the title gives you an idea of what it's about, but what direction do you go with that title with that book?
So this is a book I co-authored with a now good friend of mine, Professor Daiki Kato, and oddly, he termed or coined this word, rolefulness, and he realized, we have multiple roles in our life, and they define us. They give us a sense of purpose. But many of us struggle with role satisfaction. Our roles are challenging. We have this challenge in either fulfilling them or pursuing them. We have a lot of role distress, role conflict, even role where we feel captured in our roles. And I actually interviewed him on my podcast because he related role to Ikigai. And eventually I told him, you need to trademark this and you should write a book. How about we write a book together? And yeah, I really believe our roles are very important and are a strong source, one of the strongest sources of Ikigai, because they give us a sense of purpose, meaning, social connection. And I thought, yeah, we've got to write a book on this. So that's how that came about. And we launched it this year.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
Mm.
In terms of the roles that we all sort of fill, especially with our audience the way it is, 90% men. I mean, this podcast is pretty simple in who we're speaking to. The 10% women that are on here are very supportive also, of their men or men they know, men in general. So, but the roles for men that are out there that they seem to struggle with, and you and I were talking about this beforehand, seems to be that fatherhood and that husband role. Those are the roles that are we all view as the most important. Those are the roles that we also view as sometimes the hardest to fill. Um, and I'm wondering now, as I'm sitting here listening to everything you're saying, if part of the reason is because we haven't really attached the joyfulness of life, the what makes that role worth living. We're just so concerned with, what we have to do to fulfill it that we stop enjoying
Yes.
it. Am I missing this or am I close?
No, I think you're right. And I think if we think about goals, we spend a lot of time planning our goals, even holidays. We'll plan for months or our holidays. Yet for some reason, we don't seem to discuss roles objectively or think about what kind of father do I want to be or what kind of husband. We have this intuition, maybe, but yeah, we don't talk about it with friends, not in the same way we talk about goals. We don't even celebrate these roles. Maybe we celebrate once we've had a child and we think, oh, I'm a father now, or I'm going to be a father. But yeah, roles, especially for men, I think fatherhood and being a husband comes with these challenges, and usually there's no manual. And
Right.
it's something we have to kind of learn, I guess, learn or lean into through life experience. We often have complicated relationships with our own father. So being a son is a role, and we often, yeah, I mean, I can't remember having many conversations with my father that were helpful in helping me understand myself because my parents divorced. He was a very loving father, but parents got separated, and then I rarely saw him. So yeah, we have all these struggles in life, and then one day we get married, we become a father thinking these things will bring us happiness, which they do. But they also come with challenges we seem to think we have to sort out by ourselves.
Hmm.
And typically men struggle to share, to reach out and say, oh, look, I'm struggling. So that's in part why we wrote the book on rolefulness. And it might even be a good idea to write a book, maybe rolefulness for men or rolefulness for fathers.
Yeah, I'd like to read that when you get that done.
Yeah.
So let me know. But you brought up just a second ago, you brought up a very, very interesting and I think often overlooked perspective on roles. As soon as we started talking about roles, I automatically went in my head to, fatherhood and to being a husband, because that's the role that we move into. And I think that as men, one of the roles we struggle with the most is the role of being a son. As a grown man, you're still a son. You're still dealing with, the sins of the father before you, in a lot of cases. And I think that we kind of we push that aside because now we have the new job. So we don't worry about the old job of being the son because now we have the new job of being the father or being the husband. And unfortunately, it's that relationship of being the son and the unresolved issues there that mess up our attempts
Yes.
at being the father and the husband of the future. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit. How does Ikigai help you kind of, I don't know, transition or make you maybe deal with that in some way?
I think everyone's experience is different, but if I am to share and offer advice, I had a very awkward relationship with my father because one night he came home to an empty house, and it really, I think it destroyed him, and he was never the same. He did later remarry and have another son, and then we did reconnect, and then for him, we could only have this relationship at a distance, and that was pretty much Skype when Skype was a thing.
Hmm.
And every time I did go to see him, I think it brought a lot of pain for him. So I think I developed a lot of compassion for my father, and I sort of had to let go of everything we'd lost because my memory of him was he was very loving. I also had this understanding like when we're young and we're children, I think it's easy to be a father, but once you realize your son has become a person and they have intellect and they have interests, you start to question, oh, can I be a good father to my teenage son or my adult son? And, my son's, he's a rock star. He's far more intelligent than me, but I've found a way to be fun and playful. We're almost brotherly. But my father had cancer and it was clear he was going to die. And I thought, I need to express myself to my father. I need to do that in a way that was comfortable for him. So I remember writing a letter and just expressing both, I guess, the sadness in losing him, but also the gratitude for all that he had done for me, for all that he had done for me that I didn't know of. I know he had to pay for school fees, all these things. So we do have complicated relationships with our fathers, but yeah, they're human. They had their own problems, or they have their own problems. And I think we can always thank them in some way, even if they've been pretty hard on us. Often fathers guide us to be the father we want to be. And maybe what I lacked or missed from my father, I now can give to my son. So there is this idea of kind of get it sorted before it's too late. And whatever medium works, if it's a conversation or if it's a letter, make sure you write it or say the words. And that kind of frees you from this anxiety or this obviously regret of not saying what you wanted to say or perhaps solving an issue or getting clarity on the past. And
Appreciate you
that's a
sharing that.
role.
Yeah.
That's your role. That's like part of your role now,
Uh,
is to how can I be a good son? Like, how can I support my father or my parents?
yeah, I do. I appreciate you bringing that up and sharing that with us. The when you wrote that letter, if you don't mind me asking, when you wrote that letter, was it a case of I'm going to write the letter to get it out of me, or was it something that your father actually got to read?
Oh yeah, no, I sent it to him, and he was a man of few words, but he did thank me on the phone and said, thank you for writing that letter. I really appreciated it. And yeah, it freed me. Um, and yeah, it was just something I knew I should do. And actually, my mother died of cancer 20 years ago, and I gave her a gift. It's like a gift. And the gift I gave her was she loved socializing. And it's going to sound weird, but I gave her a living funeral. And there's a movie about this, which I later saw. But I basically had a little party for her, hired a string quartet, had all her friends come to, you know, basically say goodbye rather than, have that happen at the funeral. So I've always kind of been aware once parents get sick, do what you have to do.
Great advice, really and truly
Yeah.
great advice. And I'm sorry for your losses. Yeah,
Thank you.
100% for sure. What you just did right there is part of what you were talking about. It's very hard for men to even do what you just did, on a show like this. For us to get in touch with what's actually going on in here and
Yeah.
then vocalize it is very difficult. So, first, power to you for being able to do that and for doing it. But yeah, that's something that men have a really, really hard time with, for sure.
I agree. And I think the hardest thing for me was this realization I'm a provider. I've got to provide. And I felt flawed, and I would compare myself to other fathers who seemingly seem to have it all together. And I really struggled with, yeah, money and education, all these things about being a provider. It was sort of became this fear that I'm not a real man, or I'm weak. And so all this internal conversation was very destructive. But the one quality I did have was it was very loving. And so I guess I'm lucky. For me, I've always found it to express love or be playful with my son. So I think you've got to work to your strengths, whatever they are. And roleplayfulness is really about expressing your values in a way you want to. And I'm sure every father here would not want to express anger and fly off the handle and yell at their child, which, we sometimes, hopefully very rarely do because of the stress of life. But when that happens, we all know, you feel terrible. And you feel terrible because you've violated a core value of love, of, of, of connection. So yeah, we've got to learn to express our values, but also be forgiving when we make mistakes and then learn from them. And this is roleplayfulness, like what kind of father do I want to be? So for me, if I want to be loving, I've defined that behavior as now just telling my son. When he was much younger, I could cuddle him, piggyback, be playful. Now it's playful banter. We're almost like brothers, and we're play fighting, swearing, taking the piss out of each other. And that feels right for me. It might not feel right for everyone listening, but there's a way to express love that feels right. And then there's presence. How do you want to be present? Or how do you want to be supportive? Taking interests in your children's interests, even if they bore the hell out of you. Stuff like that. So it's worth sort of sitting down and thinking, these are the values I want to express, or these are the values that matter to me as a father or a husband. then asking the question, how do I express these in certain behaviors? And that's kind of like role mapping.
Nice. The rolefulness, the role mapping, like you just talked about. Is this something that you talk about within the Ikigai Tribe, or is this something that's part of the Ikigai coaching, or are there principles that lead to helping with this?
It's become a module in my coaching program because I really believe roles, again, give us this source of Ikigai-kan,
Yeah.
what makes life worth living, our roles. And we can have, there's actually the theory of rolefulness is you have social rolefulness, which obviously children begin to learn when they spend time with other children at school and throughout their education. And then we have internal rolefulness, and that's how we begin to develop, confidence, sense of self, and it's kind of cyclical. As we grow older, we kind of step into roles. Sometimes we develop the internal rolefulness to think, oh, I'm ready for a new role, a new profession. And then we dive into that and then develop more social rolefulness through that role experience. And the three ways that Professor Cuttall worked out to enrich rolefulness, it's very basic. We might even dismiss them as not being that important, is greetings, greeting people properly, conversations, having meaningful conversations, and expressing gratitude. And I mean, we're doing this. So we greeted each other properly before we started the podcast. Now we're having a meaningful conversation. And obviously at the end, we're going to express gratitude and we'll feel better for it. We'll feel, I'll go to bed happy. You'll continue your day feeling in a good mood. And we're living in a world now where these behaviors are being eroded with social media, QR codes. So this is a really good place to start in any situation. Co-workers, friends, neighbors, people at the local cafe, restaurant. Greet them properly, have a short, meaningful conversation, and then express gratitude. And that can be this general role you apply to any situation in your life. Then there's specific rolefulness where you take a common role, so father, husband, but yeah, you go back to that idea of who do I want to be in this role? How do I express my values? And then maybe you can even create a unique role. And you probably need life experience. You have to find your niche or your life's task. It doesn't have to be overly ambitious. So I think you've found your unique role with your podcasts. I've found mine with Ikigai. And to find that, you need to know yourself. And to know yourself, I guess you got to somehow accept yourself. There's a neuroscientist, Ken Mogi, who wrote a book on Ikigai. And he has this beautiful phrasing for accepting yourself. And he says, release yourself, which I think would appeal to our audience. If I said, hey, love yourself or accept yourself, we're probably going to roll our eyes and think, oh, God, that again. But yeah, can you release yourself to be the person you want to be or to pursue the roles that you care about? And then I think in that way, you eventually find a unique role. It doesn't have to be, the unique role. It can be a unique role that you basically define and then nurture yourself.
Interesting. I love the difference too, the way you're talking about it. And you're 100% right. I think that release yourself really does apply to the, men who are listening to this today. Some obviously feel trapped, in some of the things
Yes.
they're in, but they definitely feel bound, limited, restrained in things that they're trying to do or things they want to do. So, I do love that idea of having to release yourself in order to move forward.
Mm.
The in the Ikigai, coaching that you do, and you mentioned modules, so it sounds like it's pretty, well put together program. Is there? Well, let's do that first. Because my
Sure.
question is, are there action steps, for men to maybe start moving in that direction? But, tell us a little bit about if we look into your Ikigai coaching program and we want to find out more about it, what are we going to expect to see? How's it built? A little bit about what maybe you offer in that area.
Sure. So it should be clear, it's actually a training program for coaches or people in HR or people who want to transition to coaching.
Excellent.
And this evolved from me starting my own podcast. And so out of frustration from all these romantic notions and appropriations of the concept, including that Venn diagram, I just started a podcast as a passion project. And I thought it would make sense to interview Japanese researchers, authors who can speak English to, yeah, have them talk about Ikigai. And in the process, I discovered there's a lot of research on the concept, starting with this woman, Miyako Kamiya, who I like to refer to as the mother of Ikigai, to now almost every month I go to a website called ResearchGate, and there's papers on Ikigai relating it to, positive psychology, being used in case studies for robot design for care robots, behavioral therapy, um, sort of the list goes on and on. So I realized, oh, wow, this is a real concept in terms of psychology. Like it's a psychological concept. There's even scales that measure Ikigai. And yeah, once I started the podcast, it got traction. And then people started writing to me saying, hey, I want to coach this concept. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. When your market tells you what they want, you've kind of struck gold, so to speak. Um, and so I initially had some hesitation because I thought this is a cultural concept. I'm not Japanese, but I'd become friends with a lot of the guests I interviewed, and they were very supportive. And so, yeah, I sort of came up with my own program, and it really pulls together research while also being culturally accurate to help people understand this concept so they can coach it. And so I would relate it to a type of positive psychology that has this Japanese lens. In the West, we speak of being the best version of yourself and crushing it. We're very destination focused, goal focused. In Japan, they're very different. Japanese don't talk things up. Japanese find purpose in the small. Uh, and Japanese have this incredible ability to be present. So it involves that lens. So rather than trying to be the best version of yourself, it's more about being your authentic self in different areas of your life. And it really begins with this idea of you have multiple sources of Ikigai. And the first thing you do is you identify them. And there are actually health and Ikigai creation advisors in Japan. I only discovered this a few years ago. They also use the research of me called Kamiya, but they define Ikigai as you have personal Ikigai sources, which might include hobbies, your interests. You have relational Ikigai, which is Ikigai you would share with someone who could also be a source of Ikigai. So maybe you share hobbies with your partners, with your friends, you do things with your family, obviously enjoyable things, life affirming things. And then they also have, I guess, societal or communal Ikigai, things you do for your community, which would be, service. So it really hits personal, relational, and then how do you want to serve others? So it kind of hits all these areas of our life we find meaningful. And perhaps the most life-affirming idea of Ikigai is contribution. And I think all of us are searching for how can I contribute? How can I offer my skills, my services to others in a meaningful way? We want to have impact, and I think we also want belonging. And so there's all these sub theories of Ikigai. I sort of could go on and on. that's tied into the program. And I'll share one. One is the word ibashol. I is from the verb iru, meaning to exist, and bashol means place. So your ibashol is your place to be, your place to exist. Now, this word just meant whereabouts. But in the 1960s, when Japan started having all these social problems of people skipping school or people withdrawing from work, yeah, they started to use this word as a concept of we need to help people find their place to be, where they can have a sense of purpose, have reliable social relationships, and also have a belief in the future. And so that's kind of one sub-theory of Ikigai. So there's a lot of research, and it's sort of been my challenge to put it all together. It's constantly evolving as I'm always uncovering more research. So I'll stop now.
No, I mean it's fascinating. I asked the question, so I appreciate you giving me a really good answer on it. So the Ikigai tribe then. These are people who are part of the coaching, or these are people who are following the principles. Maybe give us an idea about that.
Yeah, so these are people who've taken my program. I guess it's a certification program. It's 8 weeks together. We have these very intimate, close group sessions that go for 2 hours. And now there's a lot of pre-work. So I'll give them worksheets to read and then podcasts to listen to. And then we discuss it. And rather than being some sort of strict guide that you must follow, because this is such a personal, subjective concept, it's like I'm giving them a big toolbox of Ikigai that then they pull from to use in a coaching context that makes sense for their audience or their niche. So I've had teachers, psychologists, coaches, HR managers, and they all use this knowledge in different ways. I mean, it's quite odd that I've built a business out of one word, Ikigai. And to be honest, all the misconceptions and misunderstandings have sort of helped my business because people usually fall for the romantic take or the inspiring take on this concept. But some people either intuitively think it's a bit off or they dig deeper and then they usually find me and then they want to learn more. So yeah, it's really I find myself sometimes thinking, how did this all happen? This one
Right.
little word that people seem to fall in love with, yet it's greatly misunderstood. And then ironically, Japanese don't consider it a special word because they grow up with it and they don't even talk about it that much. And then a lot of Japanese wouldn't even know there's a ton of research on the concept. So it's, yeah, a very unique word, and it's sort of this unique situation I found myself in.
That's funny. So if you're raised with mindfulness or you're raised with, talking about purpose, then to you that's just normal. And that's kind of how it is to the Japanese. This is just a normal thing. It's to the folks who weren't raised with that or that concept that it becomes new and it becomes intriguing.
Yeah, I was trying to think, is there one word that's like unique to Australian culture that's open to interpretation, that's not something we'd use every day, but something that's normal, like we grow up with? And the only word I could think of was mateship, which has, a very different meaning.
Hmm.
But we have that expression, "G'day, mate." But we also have this ideal or cultural value of mateship. And ask 10 Australians what it is, you'll get 10 different answers. But we all have this feeling for it, and it's evolved. It became important with our involvement in the First World War. Now it probably includes this idea of multicultural. Uh, some people it just means being a good mate. To other people, it might involve, this idea of service. Or some people might say, yeah, this is a strong Australian cultural value. So we have one word, but Japanese seem to have hundreds of these unique words that we find fascinating. Yet for them, they're just, yeah, normal words they grow up with.
Nice. Sometimes those are the best ones. So I can absolutely
Yeah.
see that. All right, that's wonderful. I apologize because I haven't given you a lot of space on the podcast, but the podcast
No.
is the Ikigai podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
And is the purpose of the podcast then, in terms of how it relates to the rest of your movement and what you're working on here, is that to build awareness primarily? I'm curious what the purpose is of the podcast in your world.
Yes, that was the reason. And I remember the night I decided, it's like, that's it. I saw that popular Venn diagram on the World Health Organization website and I thought, that's it. I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to interview Japanese researchers. I'd done podcasts before. My background was in web design, so it was very easy for me to put up a website. I found this particular name coming up in online articles. Someone called Professor Akihiro Hasegawa. I reached out to him, discovered he barely speak English, but amazingly he agreed to come onto the podcast. And I'll always be grateful because it kickstarted. And the podcast is more finding people who are usually subject matter experts. Culturally, they have a strong connection to Japan if they're non-Japanese. And then slowly I thought, oh, I should really include people who do things like, archery or a martial art or some sort of Japanese practice. Obviously, it was important to interview Japanese from all walks of life. So it's not, you know, personal transformational stories. It's more, yeah, awareness culturally, academically on what this concept is. And because it's subjective and personal, you get these interesting stories, but you also get, scales or latest research on the concept. And also, I dive into relatable subjects. And yeah, it's something I really enjoy. It's one of my sources of Ikigai is to find a guest and have the conversation.
Nice. And it looks like you've been doing that for upwards of, 4 or 5 years. Is that about right?
Yes, so it started 5 years ago. I think I'm up to 115 episodes. It's been quite challenging because I'm quite strict on the guest I want.
Hmm.
It's been a process and being consistent, I guess you would know is the most important thing with a podcast. You should try and release podcasts, every week, the same day, same time, all that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand that completely. It's
Yeah.
people who don't do a podcast have no idea what really goes into it. So
Exactly.
I have a great
That's
deal of
why I'm so
appreciation for, yeah, anybody who does one. Believe me, it's
grateful. Yeah, you're right. That
yeah,
there's so much work.
yeah, you get it. So no, I love that. Okay, so if people want to find out more about, the Ikigai coaching, the Ikigai Tribe, your books, your podcast, so on, does your website sort of encompass all of this? Is that where we want to send people?
Absolutely. So just go to ikigaitribe.com, probably go to the top menu and you'll see podcasts and then yeah, dive into them. I do have the book too. So there's ikigaikan.com if you want to sort of learn more about the book. And actually, I'll share something with you, Rory, too, is I did get a publishing deal with to write another book, which I've written, and that's coming out in December. It's called A Year of Ikigai. And to be honest, it probably wouldn't be for our audience. It's sort of these daily doses of Ikigai that are meant to be inspiring. And that was incredibly challenging to write, to sort of
Hmm.
write a little Ikigai each day, um, especially for someone who ironically doesn't really enjoy writing. I struggled at school, still can't spell, sort of struggle. What's a full stop again? What's a comma? So
So the guy
Yeah,
who
it's
doesn't
sort of
enjoy writing
amazing.
is now releasing his third book.
Well, that's what purpose or ikigai can do. Once you find a valuable ikigai source, it might ask something of you that you think you're not capable of, but you find out, oh, I really care about this subject. So yeah, I'll write a book or start a podcast.
Nice. Well, I mean, that's about the
Yeah.
time this podcast is going to be hitting the ground, I think, somewhere in that
Oh, right.
region. So that's perfect because you're going to be very good chance that A Year of Ikigai by Nick Kemp is going to be out on the market for folks to be able to find.
Hope so.
Yeah. Is that now, is that going to be available on the website? Is that going to be available? Is it an Amazon, Barnes and Noble's thing? You said you're working with a publisher on this, so
Yeah, that'll be in bookstores, on Amazon, probably on Barnes and Noble. So hopefully at airports. Uh,
nice.
so yeah, buy a copy, make my
Nice.
make my publisher happy.
All right. Well, when it does come out, I tell you what, make sure we get the link in there because this podcast episode is around forever. So as long as
All
I'm
right,
podcasting and this podcast is up, it's out there. So no
all
matter
right,
when that comes
appreciate it,
up,
Rory.
make sure you send that to me and you get me that link, and we'll make sure we put
All
it
right,
in
I
there,
will.
even if it's months
Thank you.
from now, because I want people who hear this and are fascinated by everything you're telling them to be able to find your book. That's important.
Awesome.
So,
Appreciate that.
perfect, perfect. All right, Nick, you've brought so much here today, and I just have it is fascinating. I love talking about this topic with you. I want to make sure that I kind of give you the opportunity to wrap us up here, as we bring this to a close. Is there anything that I didn't ask you? Is there anything that we talked about that you want to double down on? Maybe a parting thought or some wisdom for our folks, and I'll let you maybe wrap us, for this last minute or two.
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. When we talk about ikigai, we often hear the question like, "Oh, what is your ikigai?" Which is fine, and we should probably frame it as, "What are your ikigais?" But I would also say, "Who is your ikigai?" And it's probably several people. And then spend time with them and be present with them and try and do that as often as you can. That's what I would recommend we all do as fathers, husbands, brothers, sons, friends.
Wonderful. A great way to wrap too. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
All right. Author, podcast host, founder of the movement and the tribe, Nick Kemp. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for bringing everything that you did to the program. It's really been amazing to hear it, and all of my best. And I'm sure for everybody who's listening, with your new book coming out in December. I think it's fabulous. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rory. Really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we get to do this in person one day. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. That'd be wonderful. Folks, this has been another very powerful episode of the Power of Man podcast. The reason we bring these powerful men on here with these powerful messages is because we are united in hoping that you can regain your power so that you can become a better provider, a better protector, and a better leader tomorrow than you are today, so that you can become a better husband, a better father, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason that we want that for you is because you have value, because you matter. It's because you're worth it. At some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.